This is the full-frame camera that finally gives me profiles without making me think twice about packing it. This is the Sony Alpha 7C2, and it's the one I keep reaching for because it disappears in my bag yet rarely misses focus when it matters. I'd put it in the compact, rangefinder-style full-frame category aimed at hybrid creators. If you shoot a mix of stills and video and you value portability, this body makes a lot of sense. I'm talking travel, street, family events, documentary bits, and solo content where you want quality but don't want to lug a brick. It's not built to be a sports rocket or a dedicated cinema rig, but it gets very close to the look and flexibility of larger Sony bodies while keeping the footprint tiny. Living with it day to day, the size matters more than any spec sheet. It balances beautifully with Sony's small G primes, and with something like the 20-70 f4, it's a do-it-all travel setup that still fits in a sling. The grip is improved over the original, but my pinky hangs off the bottom. With lenses over about a pound, I feel that lack of leverage in my wrist. I ended up putting a small base plate on to give my hand somewhere to land. And that fixed most of my comfort gripes without ruining the compact vibe. Ergonomically, the big win is the added front dial. Being able to ride shutter with my thumb and aperture with my index finger puts me back in that fluid exposure flow I expect from a serious camera. The still, video, S&Q switch under the mode dial is another quiet triumph. I keep different exposure settings and custom buttons per mode, and flipping between them feels like switching cameras. The buttons have a nice click, and the menu system is now logical and touch-friendly. I can swipe, tap, and I don't get lost hunting for AF options like I used to on older Sony bodies. Not everything is perfect. The EVF is on the left, which I like for keeping my face off the screen, but it's small and not especially crisp. It works in a pinch, but I lean on focus magnification if I'm manual focusing or checking critical sharpness. The rear screen is bright enough outdoors, and the fully articulating hinge is solid. But again, I'm using it more for framing and menus than judging fine detail. The card slot is side-mounted and easy to reach, though there's only one. That's fine for my personal and travel work, but it's a deal-breaker if I'm shooting a once-in-a-lifetime event where redundancy matters. Also, it's micro HDMI, which is not my favorite. I baby that port when I run an external monitor. Setup took minutes. I mapped AF on, customized the FN menu for quick exposure tools, and saved separate banks for stills and S-Log video. The camera wakes quickly and feels responsive. Touch tracking is fast, and because I don't have a joystick, I rely on the screen to move points. I thought that would annoy me, but the subject tracking is good enough that I rarely touch the point mid-shot anymore. The shutter has a soft, damped thud, quiet enough for a church, a gallery, or a quiet street. I leave EFCS on most of the time for reduced vibration. At very high shutter speeds with a fast aperture, I've seen that slight cat-eye bokeh truncation in out-of-focus highlights. So I keep that in mind when I want perfect round bokeh in daylight. Core performance is where this camera earns its place. The 33 megapixel sensor strikes that sweet spot where I can crop a bit without feeling guilty, and I still get strong low-light performance. Colors from the newer processing engine look more natural than older Sony bodies I've used, especially in skin tones. The dedicated AI unit for subject detection changes how I shoot. It doesn't just find faces. It follows bodies through partial obstructions, picks up eyes on people, birds, and even insects, and sticks. I've watched the focus box predict a subject reappearing from behind a pole and jump right back to them. That's the kind of consistency that lets me focus on composition instead of babysitting focus points. For video, the files hold up. I use S-Cinetone when I need something immediately usable, and S-Log 3 when I want the most flexibility. Internal 10-bit 422 means I can push skin tones and skies in the grade without banding. 4K at 30 is oversampled and looks incredibly crisp. 4K at 60 gives me the motion I want for B-roll, but it kicks into a Super 35 crop. At arm's length, with a 20mm, that becomes a 30mm field of view, which is noticeably tighter, so I plan lens choices accordingly. Rolling shutter can show up with quick pans or fast-moving subjects in video, and with the electronic shutter for stills. If I'm tracking a train or doing whip pans, I switch to the mechanical shutter for photos and keep my moves smoother for video. Stabilization is reliable. The in-body system handles handheld static shots well, and active mode adds that extra smoothing for walk and talks with a small crop. It's not a gimbal, but it gets me watchable without nausea. Footage for casual handheld work. The camera also writes gyro data that I can use in post for even cleaner stabilization, and that's been clutch when I want something smoother than active mode can deliver. Let me talk through some real sessions. I took the A7C II on a long weekend trip with the 24mm and 40mm G primes. Walking through crowded streets, the camera looked like a compact shooter's tool, not a pro rig, and people were less tense around it. Autofocus locked onto eyes instantly, even when people turned or walked across frame. In a dim jazz bar, I shot around ISO 6400, and the files cleaned up nicely. The dynamic range in S-Log 3 let me keep neon signs from clipping while holding detail in shadowy corners. For video, I filmed a solo travel journal segment in a park. I set the camera on a tiny tripod, turned on auto framing, and the crop and pan kept me centered as I moved around a bench in a fountain. It felt like a friend panning the camera for me. I paired it with a digital shotgun mic on the Mi Shoe, which gave me clean audio without cables. In a family birthday scene, focus breathing compensation was noticeable, in a good way, while I racked focus between candles and faces on a compatible lens. It kept the frame from pulsing in and out, which used to drive me crazy. Thermals are the main limitation I had to learn. In a 75 degrees Fahrenheit room, 4K 60 gave me around half an hour before a heat warning when the screen was closed. With the screen open and the temp setting on high, I squeezed more time, but it's still better for clips than hour-long takes. 4K 30 has been stable for me until battery drain. For longer shoots, I run a USB-C power bank with PD and keep the screen flipped out. That's been reliable. Battery life on the NP-FZ100 is good, not amazing. On a mixed day with stills and short clips, I carry a spare or a power bank and don't think about it. One specific use case where this camera shines for me is street and travel portrait work. I can move fast, stay low profile, and trust that the AF will find an eye even through a crowd or a bit of flare. I frame with the rear screen, meter by feel, and I get a sharp file almost every time. Then I pivot to slow-motion B-roll. In 4K 60 for a few steps of motion, people crossing a street, a flag waving, coffee steam rising, and it all matches color and contrast. When I need to hop on a quick meeting, I plug the USB-C cable into my laptop and it becomes a streaming camera without a capture card. The image quality jump on calls is immediate, and I don't have to change any complicated settings. There are smart touches that genuinely help. The still video S&Q switch, as I mentioned, feels like having 3 cameras at once. The customizable menus and the FN menu keep me out of the deeper settings. Touch tracking is trustworthy enough that I use it almost exclusively. The quiet shutter helps in places where noise would be distracting. The sidecar door is a small quality of life win when the camera is on a tripod. And the digital audio through the Mi Shoe is spotless compared to 3.5mm cables that can introduce hiss. The trade-offs are real. The EVF is usable, but not something I want to edit through. The single card slot limits it for paid work where backup is non-negotiable. The micro HDMI port needs gentle hands. Rolling shutter sets a ceiling on how aggressive I can be with movement. And with heavier glass, I prefer a grip extension or I feel it after an hour. Even with those caveats, I keep picking this camera because it lowers the friction to carry a full-frame system. I get 33 megapixel stills with room to crop, 10-bit footage that grades smoothly, autofocus I can trust across faces, animals, and even small subjects, and a body that doesn't advertise itself from across the street. If you're a travel shooter, a street photographer, or a hybrid creator who prioritizes portability and reliable AF, this fits that brief better than anything I've used in this size. If you need dual card slots, unlimited 4K 60 recording, a larger EVF, or you shoot fast action where rolling shutter is a deal breaker, this should be a B-cam or a compact companion rather than your main. I will leave all the information about the Sony Alpha 7C II full-frame interchangeable lens camera in the comments. I hope to see you again in the following videos.